Welcome to Design Downtime, the podcast where we celebrate the joys of living a balanced creative life. I'm your host, Guy Siegel, a design director in Toronto, Canada, and I invite you to join me on this journey as we redefine what it means to be a successful design professional. Let's break free from the shackles of hustle culture and embrace the full spectrum of human experience, because life is too precious to be spent only in pursuit of productivity. Today, I'm excited to talk to Jeremy Miller. Jeremy is a UX designer, strategist, and author of Beyond UX Design, Master Your Craft Beyond Pixels and Prototypes. Through his book and the Beyond UX Design podcast, he helps designers and teams turn complex ideas into meaningful products. His work focuses on mastering the parts of the craft that live beyond the screen, like curiosity, influence, and the human connections that make great software possible. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Guy, I am so excited to be on here. I have to say, you have such a great radio voice, dude. By the way, it's very smooth and silky. I could just imagine you DJing like a late night jazz radio show or something. I don't know, man. Anyway, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much. I love this show, by the way. I love hearing everybody's random stuff that they do. What was you had one yesterday? I didn't get a chance to listen to it yet.
Yesterday's was Minecraft.
Yeah, I love it. Anyway, I just love hearing all the stuff, random stuff people love to do, because we are more than our jobs, and I love this show so much.
Speaking of radio voice, look who's talking.
I don't know, dude. I don't know. You have such mine is just high. I sound like a little kid. I don't know. You're just welcome, I'm Guy. Welcome to my show. Anyway, I love it, dude.
Jeremy, you want to talk about New Orleans?
Nolans, NOLA. Just not New Orleans. Weirdly enough, though, it's Orleans Parish, which is bizarre. But we don't say New Orleans. We say New Orleans, but Orleans Parish, which I'm saying parish. People might not know what that is. In Louisiana, we don't have counties. We have parishes.
Oh, okay.
Napoleonic Code. For some reason, we call our counties parishes, much like Kentucky is a commonwealth, not a state. But anyway, Orleans Parish, New Orleans. It's very bizarre. I don't know. I should have looked up why that's the case. I don't know. Anyway, maybe I'll Google it while we're talking. But yeah, New Orleans.
Yeah. So before we get to the origin story, what made you pick this topic?
Well, I'm New Orleans born and raised. I love New Orleans. I think New Orleans is just one of the most unique places in the world, probably. When I lived there, funny enough, when I lived there, I kind of hated it. But then since I've moved, I've grown a newfound appreciation for New Orleans, not being there anymore, and all the little things that you just didn't realize you took for granted, back in the day, before I moved. So yeah, New Orleans, it's just nobody else had talked about New Orleans yet on your show. And I just love New Orleans, man. That's how I do. It's how I roll. People from New Orleans love New Orleans, even when they say they hate it.
So you already answered the origin story. What got you there? Your parents, you were born there.
I was.
When did you leave?
So I left in 2020, right in the middle of COVID, actually. So if anyone out there is listening, please don't do this to yourself. But my wife and I both worked for GE, General Electric. GE had a big, giant office in downtown New Orleans. And they shut the office down during the pandemic. If you remember, most people probably do. It killed travel. It killed the travel industry. I worked for GE Aerospace. My wife worked for GE Power at the time. Anyway, their stock price dropped. Revenues dropped. They were trying to cut costs. So they closed our office. 400 something people, I think, all got laid off on the same day. So my wife and I both got laid off on the same day. And 2 days later, maybe I don't remember when it was, but 2 days later, my boss called me. He's like, "Listen, we got a deal for you. If you want to keep your job, you got to move your family across the country." And I was like, "Oh God, to Cincinnati of all places." And I was like, "Cincinnati, ugh." Which at the time, I've grown to actually really like Cincinnati. I actually love Cincinnati. A lot of parallels actually between New Orleans and Cincinnati. Maybe we could talk about that if we want to diverge a bit. But anyway, so it was like, well, my wife doesn't have a job. I don't have a job. We could move and still have one salary. So we did that and we ended up moving. But it's interesting because people from New Orleans tend to stay in New Orleans until they die. And especially women. Like, it's funny when like when you're younger in New Orleans, say like, you marry a girl in New Orleans, you're never going to leave because, their family's there. They never want to leave their family and stuff. And, it was like kind of one of those things I don't think we ever would have left had both of us not been laid off at the same time on the same day, So yeah, that's kind of how we ended up leaving, which ended up being a blessing actually, but, for career wise, financially at least. But, a lot of things I miss, a lot of things I still wish we had that we don't.
So you already mentioned earlier that Louisiana doesn't have counties, it has parishes.
Right.
What are other things that make Louisiana and New Orleans unique?
Oh gosh. Well, man, I'm not going to do this justice. I'm sure there are people like historians and things like that I could talk about it. But yeah, so Louisiana, owned by France at one point, and then actually New Orleans is really interesting because it was part of Spain as well for a long time. And New Orleans is actually 300 years old. It's actually, almost like 75, 100 years older than the United States is. So it's a very old city. Not as old as, I think, is it St. Peter's? There's a city in Florida that's actually the oldest. Anyway, so it was owned by France for a long time, owned by Spain. France took it back. And actually it was Spain first, I think, then France. Anyway, I should have known this. I don't know. I'm not a history major. But anyway, it's got a lot of Spanish influence, a lot of French influence. And actually, the architecture that you see, a lot of people think it's like French. It's not French at all. The French Quarter is actually mostly Spanish because there was a big fire. Most of the buildings burned down and the Spanish rebuilt it. And so it's actually very, very like Mediterranean. It's got like a very Mediterranean kind of look and feel to a lot of the buildings there. So anyway, Spain had it for a while. So it's just this like hodgepodge, this sort of mixture, right? And then you had a lot of the slaves coming in through the slave trade through the New Orleans from the Mississippi. And so you had a lot of that like sort of Caribbean and African culture. And so there's just, the music and the food and everything is just unique. It's a very weird spot. It's a unique spot. Obviously the food is well known throughout the world. The music is known throughout the world. It's one of the few places where you can just go anywhere in the world and someone says like, where are you from? And you give them a city and they know exactly immediately. They know about it, very few places like that. New York, Paris, Berlin, London, things like that. But New Orleans is one of the just like pearls of the world, I think. I don't know. Unique things about it. Obviously the food, seafood, right in the Gulf of Mexico. So the food is amazing. There's a Creole influence, which has, a lot of like African and slave influence. Then there's like right outside of New Orleans and Louisiana is more Cajun, which we could maybe talk about. The Cajun and Creole, everybody kind of assumes they're the same, but they're very different. They're not at all the same. So you got a lot of that Cajun influence from outside of New Orleans and Louisiana, Southern Louisiana, things like that. And so, yeah, it's just such a unique place, man. I don't know. We could dig into any of those if you want, but yeah, that's it.
Yeah. We're going to dig into jazz. We're going to dig into food because food is the most important thing in the world. Before we get to those, you mentioned something really interesting, that it's one of those cities that you tell someone anywhere in the world that you're from there and they know that city. I'm curious to know because a lot of that comes from, I've never been, not yet, but I've seen a lot of, movies or TV shows that take place there. Did I get the real picture of it?
Oh no, not at all. Not at all. The only, what is the name of the show? Well, most of the time when you watch a show about New Orleans or TV about New Orleans, they all have like Cajun accents, like French accent, which is not true. Nobody in New Orleans has a Cajun accent. I've never met like anyone from New Orleans, at least. They actually sound like they're from Brooklyn or New York. And when it's funny, when I was a kid, my accents changed quite a bit because I went to college at LSU and got out of New Orleans and I lost the accent. But we have an accent in New Orleans called the Yat accent. And it's called the Yat accent because people go, hey, where Yat? Like, hey, like that's like hello, right? Like, hey, where Yat, darling? How you doing, darling? And it sounds very much like a Staten Island or like a Brooklyn accent. And when I was a kid, I used to go out of town. People would think we were from New York. So anyway, the first thing is the accent is completely wrong. Usually when you see a TV show, there's a Mardi Gras parade going on. Like, they're on Bourbon Street and people are dancing and stuff, which happens a lot, on Bourbon Street and stuff, obviously, but it's just like people would go there just to do that because I think they see that on TV. So they assume that's what they do. But when you go to New Orleans, it's like another city. I mean, it's just pretty much like you go to New York, there's people hustle and bustle, people walking around stuff. So that's very different. Things that are kind of the same, like if you go out downtown, usually, maybe not downtown, but more towards the French Quarter, there's another area called Tremé. There's another area called the Marigny and things like that. And you see like people playing a horn on the side of the street or something, or, and they'll have a hat out or something, like tips that you actually do see quite a bit. And actually a lot of kids in high schools will go and just play, like they'll have like brass bands, tuba or sousaphone. It's not really a tuba, sousaphone, and, horns, trumpets, trombones, things like that. And they'll go play on the corner. And just, and they're amazing. Like you think like most, people on the side of the street, they're usually like, hacks or whatever, but these kids are like really talented kids. Anyway, so that kind of stuff's normal. Or that kind of stuff you do see. I will say this, I haven't seen like every single thing about New Orleans, so I could be wrong, but the most accurate portrayal I've ever seen was HBO's Treme, which is all about New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. And that is the most accurate portrayal of New Orleans I think I've ever actually seen. They did a really good job with that one. And they're just little things, like you just catch people like drinking a beat of amber beers and things like that. It was just a local brewery, close, like an hour outside the city. Abita is big down there, stuff like that. Just the culture, you kind of saw it. And it was the most accurate portrayal of New Orleans I've ever seen. No fake Cajun accents, and things like that. But anyway, that, most of the time when you see stuff, it's usually wrong or fake, especially if it's all like Mardi Gras in like, the middle of the summer or something like that.
Let's continue with the theme of music. Tell me about the music of the area.
Oh man. All right. So there's many different, New Orleans music is not a monolithic thing. Obviously jazz is something people hear a lot about, but brass music is also really big. We definitely went into that because I've got some brass bands that I really enjoy. Hip hop obviously is really big, like Cash Money Records, Lil Wayne, Master P. You don't hear much about him anymore, but in the 90s, No Limit Records and stuff was really big. There's another genre of music called bounce that came out of New Orleans. Have you ever heard of bounce music?
I don't think so.
Yeah. So bounce music is like, it's hip hop, but it's got like a da da da, like it's just like you kind of do like this, like I'm dancing and nobody can see me on the radio, but it's like really fast hip hop, and you kind of like twerking and stuff is kind of like something you would see a lot, like a hip hop show. But anyway, I'm not doing bounce justice. I wish I had a way. Big Frida is, by the way, if you want to Google Big Frida, she's an artist that you would probably be the most famous. I think she was actually on MTV. I want to say she was also on the drag show, RuPaul's Drag Race. Yes. Jazz actually is obviously very popular, Louis Armstrong, like older jazz and stuff like that. But a lot of the like newer jazz you hear actually like came out of New York and stuff, Miles Davis and Coltrane and all the like outside of New Orleans. So those were, not necessarily like a New Orleans thing, although there are tons of just amazing jazz players like the Marsalis family. Delphio Marsalis and Wynton Marsalis. And, I think you might know Wynton Marsalis. Actually, he was the band leader, I think, for Jay Leno or one of the late shows. Actually, speaking of late show, John Batiste was one of the band leaders for Jimmy Fallon. And he also did the score for one of the Disney movies that was about jazz. But one of my favorite genres of music are brass bands. And brass bands traditionally would have been, like they kind of march around and you hear them on in parades and things like that. But they also, in a lot of bands, they'll just like do concerts and stuff now, obviously. But I mentioned those kids on the corner, right? Like you've got the sousaphone player, you've got the tuba player, you got, the like trombone, trumpet, saxophone usually. And it's just like, I don't even know how to describe it, man. Like you just got to Google like New Orleans brass bands, but let's see, Galactic. Well, Galactic's not a brass band. Rebirth is my favorite brass band, actually. Rebirth brass band, but there's like Dirty Dozen, Soul Rebels, Hot 8. There's a Treme brass band. You probably heard of like Preservation Jazz Hall. It's like a really famous music venue down there. They have a house band it's really like more like a brass band. Yeah, man, I don't know. It's just like you just want to dance. Like you just kind of, I just like when I'm driving in my car, I drive around up here a lot with the windows down, sunroof open and stuff, and like crank up Rebirth or something. And I was pulling into Aldi the other day, and some woman was like, "Man, what are you listening to? You were having a great time." I was like, "I had to get myself psyched up for the grocery shopping, baby." I hate it. So anyway. Yeah, brass bands. Brass is probably my favorite genre of music out of New Orleans. And it's just great. Like, put it on, you have a party, you just want to like boil some crawfish, just like play, I don't know, like yard games and stuff. But I love brass bands. If you haven't checked it out, anybody listening, Rebirth is my favorite by far. I like them a lot. They actually did the Treme. I want to say they did the Treme intro song. I think it might have been Trombone Shorty, actually. But anyway, I think they have a song, or maybe they did it together. I can't remember. I'm going to say Rebirth had something to do with the Treme intro, which again, I mentioned Treme was like one of the most accurate portrayals, and they featured jazz or brass bands a lot in that show as well. So yeah, that's I don't know. We could dig into any of that if you want, but that's what I love.
I think you mentioning crawfish is a perfect segue into the food of New Orleans.
Yeah, so the food in New Orleans. So this is interesting. So when people think of New Orleans, right, I think they think of crawfish. They think of Cajun food. I think a lot of people think of Cajun food. Cajun, very different from Creole. And New Orleans is more Creole. Okay, so Cajuns, and you're up in Canada, right? So Cajuns actually came from Canada. So if I'm not mistaken, there's an area of Canada, like Acadiana, right, up in Canada somewhere? Right, okay. So that's where they're from. And they got forced out, I want to say, what's the story behind that? I want to say there was... Did the British kick them out because they were Catholic? Something like that. Anyway, they came from Canada all the way down to South Louisiana, which is very bizarre that they came all the way down here, but two completely different climates. But anyway, they came down and they were French. And maybe I guess that's what, like, if the British kicked them out, because when they took over Canada, they probably came down to Louisiana because it was French, I would assume. So anyway, they settled in South Louisiana. And the Cajuns that live in South Louisiana, generally more rural, often white. It's more, the food tends to be more rustic. So think like gumbo, for instance. There's a Cajun gumbo and a Creole gumbo. There's different variations. A lot of times like tomatoes and stuff will be more in like the Cajun food. So if you've got like Cajun gumbo, there might be tomatoes in the Cajun gumbo. Creole gumbo is more brown. So one's red, one's brown. Gumbo is another famous dish that's from Louisiana. So that, or New Orleans, sorry, that came more from Creole. So when you think about boiled crawfish, right, like who was eating like food in the cities, right? They probably were more upper class. So you had a lot of slaves cooking food, servants cooking food for richer families and stuff. They're not eating mud bugs. They're not eating like the little like things that look like insects almost coming out of the ground, right? Like that was a more rural thing. And so the Cajuns, that's where they did the more crawfish balls and stuff. Those are actually more like Cajun, like out in the country. Creole, and then you got Cajun French, which is more of like a pidgin French, right? So if you're in Canada, do you speak French by any chance? You don't. Yeah. So anyway, so Cajun French is a pidgin French. It's almost like a separate sub language. It's very different. It's a lot of unique, like almost like Haitian Creole kind of, right? It's more similar to that. It's not quite proper. It's the sort of like quote unquote uneducated. Historically speaking, the French dialects out in the country. Then you got Creole, which was more of like proper. It was the upscale food of the upper class, if you will, in New Orleans. And a lot of it was influenced more from African type of foods. So like gumbos and things like that, that was more stews. You had other things like that. What else would be Creole? Like, like black-eyed peas and things like that are more of like African and stuff. So you've got like more butter. You've got more like refined type foods that were Creole. And so you've got, a good example might be like, trout almondine or something. It's like a fried, pan seared with flour usually. And then there's like a Meunier sauce, like a butter almond sauce on top. Things like that would be more considered like Cajun or Creole rather. So that's the difference between Cajun and Creole. A lot of people think they're the same, but Creole is more urban, Cajun more rural. And they, in Creole, they spoke more like a different dialect of French as well. So it was more like upper class and stuff. And a lot of times you actually had like free black people in New Orleans as well. So a lot of Creole families are actually black. So you didn't have, Creole more African-American, Cajuns more white, French, Canadian, that's kind of where they came from. So anyway, there's a lot more differences there, obviously, but those are the big ones as it like relates to food. So boiled crawfish, actually Cajun, not Creole. So yeah, they're not the same. I'm probably screwing up a lot of this history, by the way. I apologize in advance. Someone goes and Googles this and be like, Jeremy was totally wrong. I want to throw that footnote out there. I did not prepare as much as I probably should have. I didn't even think about like, maybe I should like fact check some of the crap I'm going to say. I didn't think about that. So anyway, I could be totally.
It's okay. This show is about passion. It's less about,
I like that.
We're not here for the facts, Jeremy.
yeah, Google it. You get the facts.
Do your own research.
Do your own research, please.
You've been outside of New Orleans for 5 years. What are some of the things you really miss?
Yeah. Oh, the food. The food is one of them. I miss the thing I miss the most are the people. Not the people, like the characters. I miss the culture, I guess maybe is really what I'm saying. I'll give you an example. Like I live in Cincinnati, right? And when I walk around my own neighborhood, which actually feels very much like New Orleans, sometimes people will do, for the most part, even outside of Cincinnati, outside of my neighborhood, they keep their heads down. They look down. They don't look at you when you pass them. And like in New Orleans, everybody just says, hey, how you doing? Where you at? Actually is another thing. Like, or another thing people say is, all right. Like, that's it. Like, you just look like, all right, man. All right. And that's like hello kind of. All right means hello. So anyway, it's just like, all right. And you just kind of pass each other. I was like, how's it going? What's going on, man? But like nobody does that here. Well, not nobody, but a lot of people, it's less common, I would say. So I miss that. It's just the openness. Cincinnati is not a cold, unfriendly city. I don't want to give it that impression, but I just feel like New Orleans, everybody's kind of in it together because New Orleans is kind of a shithole, really. Like it's an amazing place, but the government is corrupt, like shit is sinking. You've got to go through like these awful natural disasters, like hurricanes. You got to evacuate. There's just like the Saints always suck, like our sports teams are terrible. Politicians, cops are corrupt. Everybody's like going to jail. You're all in it together though. It's just like we're all kind of suffering together, whether you're, rich or poor. And so people, I feel like just kind of like appreciate the fact that we're all kind of in it together, And so it doesn't matter. You could be like a rich person walking next to somebody like a homeless man and they'll look at you like, all right, how's it going, man? Hey, how you doing? Up here, people just ignore you. It's sort of bizarre. The other thing that's really weird, and this was really weird for me, but I grew up in New Orleans and New Orleans is actually majority African-American. So the whites are actually a minority. I want to say it's like 57 or something. Huge Vietnamese population, huge Spanish population, and obviously a lot of white people as well. But everywhere you go in New Orleans, there are black people everywhere. And it's just like, I took that for granted, like having people that weren't like me. Like when I lived in New Orleans, I lived in this really cool neighborhood across the river from the French Quarter called Elders Point. My next door neighbor was black on one side, next door neighbor was black on the other side. Across the street, I had a couple black neighbors and stuff. And I moved up to Cincinnati and like everyone is white. Everyone is white. It's just bizarre. I go days sometimes without seeing a black person. And I don't live in like a fancy estate. I live in like an urban area. Like I look outside, I can see downtown from my front door. I live in like kind of an urban environment, and it's segregated. It's so segregated here, which is weird to me. Like black people on one side of the city, white people on the other, and you don't really cross paths. I just feel like it's awful. Like I hate that. And one of the things that I really was like excited about before we moved was like having my kids learn music, learn to play piano or horn or something from like an old black jazz player or something. You know what I mean? Someone with a lot of soul. And you just like up here, like that doesn't even exist. Like if I tried to find that person, I don't think I could. Maybe there's somebody like that in Cincinnati. I don't want to say that they don't exist at all. I don't want to portray Cincinnati as like in the negative light, but like that kind of thing. It's just like everywhere. It's just like everybody knows somebody like that. That was like super bizarre to me. It was kind of uncomfortable a little bit. Like, I don't know. Anyway, I have a friend up here who's black, he's actually from Ethiopia. And we were just talking about this the other day and he's like, yeah, I feel so weird here too, because he lived in Texas for a long time. And then he lived in Georgia as well. And it was not like that at all down there. And up here, super bizarre. Anyway, the food, obviously. I'll give you a funny story, dude. First night, we move up here first night. We just pull up like 5:00, cars packed up, And I worked for GE for a long time. My wife did as well. And so we knew a lot of people up here before we moved, and everybody knew we're moving. And they're like, oh, they knew the neighborhood we were moving to. They're like, you got to go to this restaurant. This place is so good. It is like one of the best restaurants I've ever eaten at. And I will say this, we've gone back since and it's not as bad as we remember it, but I think our palates might have also changed a bit. I don't want to call the name of the restaurant out because actually we know the owners and I don't want to call them out. But anyway, so we go, we get our food, and my kid was 4 years old at the time. We start eating the food and he's like, Dad, why doesn't this food taste like anything? And I was like, dude, oh my God, please stop. Like this is like, we didn't choose this. We had to move here. Like, you're not helping, son. Like, please just stop. But, anyway, that's sort of, an analogy of like how the food, it's just like, the food isn't bad here. it's mediocre. It's just like, it could be so much better. A lot of times I think if you just add some salt, like all you need is some salt, man. I don't know. Maybe that's why everybody in New Orleans is overweight. But, I'm just like, man, the food is just like, there's no oomph to it. There's just, and I will say this, Cincinnati has a ton of really, 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 really good restaurants, like James Beard award-winning chefs. The food here is not bad by any means. I don't want to say every restaurant here sucks, but there's just more mediocre restaurants here than there are in New Orleans, because in New Orleans, if it's mediocre, it doesn't stay open. It closes. There's something about it. I just miss obviously the seafood and stuff, like I can't go get a fried shrimp po' boy anymore. I mentioned trout almondine. I don't know if I could find trout almondine anywhere in the city, to be honest. That's something I'd have to go and, go back to Galatoire's or something back in New Orleans and get that. But, that's probably the thing I miss: the music, the culture, the people, which is everything almost, I guess. I will say this, the architecture, I do miss the architecture of New Orleans. But I also find that Cincinnati has, I don't want to say nicer architecture, but I found that the architecture here is more ornate, and it's really pretty architecture here, different architecture. But our old house was built in 1847, and it was one of those shotgun with the gingerbreading and stuff on the front, just beautiful old house. Like you would look at it, it could have been on a postcard, that's what it looked, with the ferns hanging from the front porch and your rockers on the porch and stuff like that. I miss that. The other thing I miss about New Orleans, and our neighborhood is weird. We have a really old house now too. Is it built in 1870 something, but it's a brick house, and it's called Italianate architecture, which is very different. It's brick. It's skinny, but it's very tall. So it's 3 stories tall, which sounds really fancy, but it's like maybe 1 room wide. It's really, really short. So it's almost like a shotgun. It's just sort of up instead of long. But our front door is on the side. So we don't have a porch. I don't have a front porch. And the thing that I miss the most about New Orleans, those old shotgun houses, they were built for community. Because when you walk out to the front porch, you could look down that block and up the street, and you could see every single porch. And you could see when people were hanging out on their porch. And, back in the day, you didn't have air conditioner. Everybody would sit on the stoop. And one of the things, even when we had AC, like we would go and just hang out on the front porch, and we would see neighbors walking by. We lived in a really cool neighborhood. So like the ferry was right there. So we had like tourists walking in front of our house all the time. Like I would hear people speaking like German and French and all this kind of stuff, like walking past our house. And you could look left and right and see neighbors. Hey, what's up? Hey, Miss Jackie, how you doing? Like, hey, Mr. Don, what's going on? And we knew our old neighbors still send us Christmas cards and stuff, like that kind of stuff. Like I have neighbors here, and we've met our close neighbors, but like I knew everybody on my block in New Orleans. Like during COVID, dude, this was amazing. I had a horn player across the street who played trombone, who actually went to college in Cincinnati, weird enough. Anyway, he was on across the street, and then another horn player 2 houses down from him. And then like during COVID, they would get on the front porch and play together, and all the neighbors would like sit outside of the front porch, like hanging out, listening to, this little concert from our neighbors across the street. It was awesome. And then we got to know like everybody. Would that have happened had we not had COVID? Probably not. So there's a little silver lining there, but the architecture of the houses and the layout of the neighborhood really like enabled that. And I miss that. It's like, it's not built for community like New Orleans was. And I hate to say that, because who knows, the people building the neighborhood and stuff 100 years ago or so, I'm sure they cared about community just as much as people in New Orleans, but I miss that. That's one of the things I think I miss the most, that community aspect.
Last question. As I said, I've never been. I want to go and visit. What are some hidden gems?
Oh man. All right. Hidden gems. My old neighborhood, Algiers Point. I love Algiers Point. So New Orleans is interesting. You've got this big river that runs through the city, right? And it's called the Crescent City. It's a crescent, right? The river's a crescent. And then it goes around, and then it comes back around. It makes this sort of point. And that point, on the other side of the point, is where the French Quarter is. And that's where Jackson Square is, like right there. And New Orleans is really funny too. Like you've got the West Bank and you got the East Bank. And people do not cross the river. Mostly because there's just one bridge there's a couple bridges, but there's just like one big bridge, and sometimes it might take like an hour to cross the bridge. So people just do not cross the bridge. Traffic is bad. So you got the West Bankers and the East Bankers, and Algiers Point's on the West Bank. So people from the East Bank, they never go to the West Bank. Even though Algiers Point's this beautiful old neighborhood and stuff right across the river, people don't go there. So it's like a little secret. Like sometimes it might be in some like tour guide books and stuff, but locals and stuff wouldn't even go over there all that much. I had friends that lived uptown, the Garden District and stuff, and they would be like, "Oh, I got to go to the West Bank to go to your house." I'm like, "Fuck you, dude! Like, come on, it's literally like a 10-minute drive." But they still wouldn't do it. Anyway, Algiers Point. There's a ferry that goes from foot of Canal Street to my old neighborhood, and I lived about like 10-minute walk from that ferry. So you could take that walk across, and there's like the best coffee shop I've ever been to called Congregation Coffee Roasters. And congregation is what you call a group of alligators. So it's got that kind of like, alligator, something. Anyway, so it's called Congregation Coffee. It's now owned by the Brennan Restaurant Group, which you probably heard of, like Brennan's and Palace Cafe, things like that. But anyway, Algiers Point, amazing little neighborhood, beautiful old architecture. It's not going to be a ton of tourists like you see like Uptown Garden District walking around. It's generally pretty safe. There's an awesome coffee shop. There's a couple of restaurants. There's a really good pizza place. There's actually a jazz walk that has like little placards and old and statues of like old jazz players and stuff. You can kind of walk and learn a little bit of history. Best views of downtown. Take a picture from Algiers Point. Also the ferry, I think it costs like $1 or $2, but that's amazing pictures too. One of the things I used to love that you mentioned, I'll go back, something I used to miss. We used to live in that neighborhood, and our office was downtown. My wife and I would walk to work. So it's amazing. Like we would take the ferry, walk to work, and you get these like giant ships in the river, big old cargo ships, sometimes cruise ships. And the ferry has to like kind of wait for those cruise ships to pass because they have the right of way, and big cargo ships and stuff. And you're like 20 feet from like this giant Maersk cargo ship, or like this giant Caribbean cruise ship. And just cool, man. It's just awesome. Like little, like great photo op, I have some like really cool, like pictures of us, like selfies behind like this giant Maersk cargo ship going past, but you're like really close. Like, I can't think of another opportunity where you might have that. Like maybe in New York City or something, perhaps, I guess, but I don't even know. LA probably doesn't have like opportunity to get that close to like big cargo ships. But anyway, so that's really cool. Great photo opportunity. The Marigny is also another really great place. Like everybody goes to Bourbon Street. Bourbon Street is awful. Like, do not go to Bourbon Street. It's a tourist trap. It smells like vomit. If you want to go to Bourbon Street, walk like a block or two, but stay away from Bourbon Street. Bourbon Street during the day is not so bad. Bourbon Street at night is awful. And Bourbon Street during the day, there's really nothing to do there. Royal Street, though, it's like one street over. So going towards the river, you just walk a block. Royal Street's got a lot of really cool art galleries, antique shops, just really cool stuff like that on Royal Street. And there's just like a bunch of like really great little restaurants and things. I haven't been there. Well, I haven't lived there in 5 years. We go back every year, but a lot of those places that I probably remember going to are probably closed since COVID. But Royal Street's really cool. Then there's another street in the Marigny called Frenchman Street that is kind of where the locals go. So there's a lot of really awesome jazz clubs and music clubs and venues and bars and stuff on Frenchman Street. If you walk all the way down Bourbon Street, it turns into like, there's like I'm doing hand signals. Nobody listening can actually see, but the French Quarter is a square. But then the streets in New Orleans are really confusing because they follow the river. So you've got like Poydras Street and Frenchman Street sort of form a V at the end of the French Quarter. And if you walk all the way down Decatur Street, which is the last street along the river, it turns into Frenchman Street, but going like, I don't even know if that's north or south. Like it's all weird. Anyway, that's a really cool little like local spot. So you're going to find a lot of locals and stuff there. Frenchman Street at this point is probably pretty well known. I mean, it's probably in guidebooks and stuff, but anyway, avoid Bourbon Street. Don't go to Bourbon Street. And I don't know, you can't go wrong with most little like neighborhood restaurants and stuff like that. I will say this, if you're looking for a po' boy, do not go anywhere that has a tablecloth and glass or porcelain plates for the po' boy. If you go get a po' boy, it has got the best. I'm not saying you can't. You can find, you go. But like, if you want a real po' boy, go to a gas station or a little like quick convenience store, a corner market or something like that. Verdi Mart is probably one of the best you'll find. Cash only though, unless they might take cards now, but it used to be cash only. And it's got to be rolled up in butcher paper. And you just eat it like that. Like you unroll it, like it doesn't come on a plate. It doesn't come with fries. Maybe there's a combo, but like gas stations are probably like the best po' boys you're going to get, similar to like boudin. Boudin, actually, we didn't talk about that, but that's like another Cajun thing. It's like a sausage sort of stuff with rice and meat. Same kind of thing. You don't get boudin at a restaurant. You get boudin from a gas station, and it comes wrapped in foil from like one of those little like heat drawers or something. That's the best food down there. So po' boy, do not get it from a fancy restaurant with a waiter.
And with that, Jeremy, where can people find you?
Well, they can find me in Cincinnati, unfortunately, no longer in New Orleans. But if you want to find me online, beyonduxdesign.com. Go there, got all my stuff, book. I do coaching. I've got my book I wrote. I do, if you're interested in having me talk, I do talks. But coaching stuff, podcast, book, all that stuff, beyonduxdesign.com.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, of course, man. Happy to do it. Thank you for having me.
This is all for this episode of Design Downtime. Thank you for joining me. And until next time, I hope you enjoy your downtime.